Well, hello there and welcome. We are so glad that you are taking time out of your day to listen and learn. It is so meaningful to me and to the rest of the folks with Treehouse and the people you're going to be hearing from on the panel today. This is the second installment of Treehouse's equity campaign. And what I personally love about it is that it's a campaign. This isn't just going to be something we do this year and then next year, it's ongoing. And the idea that this is a journey, it's never we've arrived when it comes to equity. It's something we're constantly working on. And that's why we're so grateful that you're part of this. We had a first event back in May. This is the second one. And we're calling this Alumni Advocating for Change at the intersection of education and foster care. I can't wait for you to hear from our panel, but first we have something I'm really excited to share. It's our keynote speaker, a woman impacted by foster care who is now a passionate advocate. So let's welcome State Senator Tawanna Nobles.
Hello, and thank you for having me. My name is Tawanna Nobles, and I am a state senator representing the 28th Legislative District. I am proud to sit on both the Early Learning and K-12 Education Committee and the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee, where I strive to improve educational outcomes for all Washingtonians. Education in Washington has been central to my life. I attended Tacoma Community College before transferring to the University of Puget Sound, where I earned my undergraduate degree and Master of Arts in Teaching before becoming a teacher at Stadium High School and Lincoln High School. Since 2016, I have served on the University Place School Board, where I focus on creating equity, inclusion, and transparency for every child. I'm deeply honored to be here today to share my story and my commitment to equitable education for students who have experienced foster care. I experienced foster care myself throughout high school and beyond, and I experienced firsthand the inequity and limitations built into the educational system. We know that students experiencing foster care are some of our most disadvantaged students. In Washington State, only 50% of students experiencing care graduate from high school. This is because we face higher risks of poverty, homelessness, incarceration, early parenthood, and substance abuse when we leave the foster care system. And I know because I fell victim to some of those statistics myself. However, I was also able to overcome those statistics, partially because of the points of contact that helped me, the parents, teachers, coaches, and others who recognized how vulnerable I was and how crucial their support was to my future. I reaped the benefits of foster care at a time when I needed assistance and encouragement in my education, whether it was as simple as having shoes provided when I wanted to participate track, or as complex as helping me discover transitional housing opportunities to live on my own. So many people stepped in to help. Motivated by my personal experience and inspired by the example of those who helped me, I have become a passionate advocate for improving educational opportunities and resources for youth experiencing foster care. Of course, all young people need caring adults to help them achieve their goals and find success. As a parent, a teacher, and a coach, I know from personal experience how important consistent support and community is to a child's academic, social, and emotional growth. However, for those of us who have experienced foster care, the traditional toolbox may not be enough. We typically must overcome more obstacles than students with more conventional childhoods. We are likely to come from traumatic and less stable backgrounds that have forced us to concentrate on survival instead of focusing on attending class, joining clubs or groups, and readying for adulthood. While we are just as smart and capable as our peers, we need more of our community's help to harness our talents. To that end, this past legislative session, I prime sponsored a simple, but what I hope will be a profoundly impactful piece of legislation that mandates one adult at every public school be a point person for students experiencing care. These points of contact will be responsible for coordinating services, resources, and simply seeing the students experiencing care at that school. This is an enormous victory, as previously only one person per district served in this capacity. And those district liaisons often had too much on their plate to even be able to meet with individual students experiencing foster care. But the numbers show that face-to-face contact helps students stay in school. Having an adult in each building dedicated to their support will make a huge difference. I'm so grateful that the legislation I sponsored this past session has had overwhelming support. I was successful because of these points of contact, these dedicated people who took the time to make a difference in my life. They helped me not only in high school, but also as I transitioned into adulthood. They were vital to me being able to succeed in college as a young mother. But our work doesn't end with this bill. In fact, we are far from it. Among other things, we must recognize that BIPOC and LGBTQ+ youth experiencing foster care must also overcome bias that disrupts their education even further. As you will hear from the panel, we must address the inherent inequality of the system as part of our overall work to improve education. It's not always comfortable to talk about identity and prejudice because it means facing our country's as well as our personal failure to provide equal opportunities to underrepresented groups. But we must unlearn what we have learned. Instead of demonizing differences, we need to emphasize our commonalities while encouraging the distinctions that make us unique and special. This is especially crucial to youth experiencing foster care because our identity formation has been greatly impacted by forever questioning where we belong and trying to prove our worthiness. We need the education system to challenge us, but also to nurture us as we figure out and embrace our true selves. Public education should be a tool to guide us onto our best path, not a constraint pressuring us to conform to outdated and harmful social and cultural ideas. In today's discussion, we will hear state education experts and foster care alumni tell us what we can do to help them graduate high school at a much higher rate than 50% and then successfully transition into adulthood. The numbers support the assertion that youth experiencing care who receive the services and resources that they need are far more likely to graduate. Our goal is for Washington to have the highest graduation rate in the United States. We must build a village to make it all happen. And while so many people involved are doing a fantastic job, the system needs to continue to build an extra support. Let us keep exploring and being creative in our ideas. Children are our best asset. They deserve the absolute best. For those of you who are working with and for students, thank you for your commitment. Though you may not always be recognized, and despite endless challenges, especially throughout the pandemic, you continue to show up and you really are making a difference. Finally, to those who have experienced foster care, I say this: the hard experiences and the unfortunate circumstances are part of what create our destiny. Though they sometimes seem impossible to bear, they will give you wisdom and empathy to navigate the road ahead. So hang in there. I promise that your life story thus far, including your struggles, is preparing you for triumphant moments. As I sat on the floor of the Senate when my bill passed, I want to help unite the haves and the have-nots, the housed and the unhoused, the faithful and the hopeless. So, as we do the hard work together to lift as we climb, please stay faithful and stay hopeful. We can do this together. Thank you.
Wow. Senator Nobles, thank you so much for those inspirational words. I just can't think of a better way to kick things off. Wow. Well, it is time to check in with our panel, and I'm excited to introduce them to you now. I'm going to start with Erika Ramirez. Erika is just 22 years old and a member of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. Her journey in foster care began when she was just a toddler. Currently, she is attending Central Washington University, where she's majoring in apparel, textiles, and merchandising, and she happens to be the program ambassador. So we'll talk more with Erika in just a moment. Next, Sam Martin. Sam is a CEO and head lobbyist with SD Martin Consulting, which works with government administrations, corporations, and nonprofits to develop legislation and policies to positively impact communities. Like Erika, his journey in foster care began early. For him, it was before he took his first steps. Sam has a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Washington, Seattle, and a master's in public administration at Seattle University. Dr. Oscar Harris is the Chief Family and Community Engagement Officer for Spokane Public Schools. Welcome. With his master's in social work and an educational doctorate degree in transformational leadership, his research interests include community engagement and advocacy for marginalized families. And last but not least, Veronica Gallardo. Veronica is the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, also known as OSPI. Among her many duties, and trust me, she has a lot of them, she oversees school and district supports for ensuring graduation and post-graduation success. She is passionate about partnering with communities and educational leaders to expand services and funding for historically underserved youth. Thank you all for taking your time and agreeing to share with us your experiences and the advocacy work that you're doing right now. I want to kick things off with Sam because I had a chance to talk with each of the panelists before this event. And something he said will probably always stick with me. And he was talking about his time in foster care. And he said it always felt like you were fighting for sunlight. And that just hit me, fighting for sunlight. When you think about children and being able to get what they need, should be able to get what they need. But Sam, I want to get you to kind of explain to us, share with us, if you will, just what you mean when you talk about fighting for sunlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again today for having us. I think that for me, what I really meant by that is that oftentimes it felt like it was, I was in survival mode, right? Not really sure how to get through the day, I'm not sure how I'm going to make it to the next day, right? And the ability to focus on things like school and extracurriculars and things like that was just impossible because I was still kind of really fighting and struggling for those basic needs to be met. And so once those needs started to get met, that was the sunlight, right? And that's what allowed me to thrive. And so I really do like to compare it to a flower, right? Because you can see the beauty blossom.
Well said. And Erika, does that resonate with you at all?
Yes, that is actually a perfect way that I would describe what it was like being in foster care for me. Although it can differentiate and not everybody has the same situation, I do feel like it was difficult because I was only 2 years old and I lived with my older sisters and we were often like abandoned in places where there was no running water. We just didn't have the best situation. And even though our life was hard in the beginning, it seems like we didn't get a good, nice jump start to life. And so it's just been a constant battle my whole life until I was able to find the resources that I need to be successful and what that means for me.
Yeah. And when you think about your experience in foster care, Erika, what were some of the barriers that you faced that you're hoping other youth impacted by foster care don't have to face? What barriers?
Well, first and foremost, my hope is always that nobody has to enter the foster care system to begin with. I believe in prevention, so the parents who do suffer and end up with children in foster care, I hope that life for them is set up where they won't have to go through things like that and their children won't be taken away from them. And it's like the saying, iniquity waxes worse. So, I just want there to be like prevention, and I hope other kids don't have to grow up feeling like, well, why don't I live with my biological parents? What does this mean for me? And so just little things like that make the biggest impact, I think, other foster youth shouldn't have to face.
And Sam, did you want to elaborate on that? Are there any barriers when you think back during your time that you're thinking, gosh, I hope this changes?
Yeah, I don't. I think that there's a lot of things that still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I would really agree with Erica that ideally no one would ever have to come into these systems, and that we could support families and allow young people to be able to stay in their communities. But I think really being able to kind of address like what Senator Nobles just said, right? Being able to find the ways to create those touch points for young people. I think oftentimes it's not the only solution, but I think a lot of things that are missing for young people is trusting, loving adults and supports in their lives, right? And so, and that oftentimes comes from community and family members and things like that, right? But it's also, educators, it's also other community members and things like that too. And so, how do we create those circumstances for young people so that they have what they need and feel supported and confident in moving forward in their lives?
Yeah, well said. And I meant to tell our audience that this is meant to be a conversation. So if you have questions for any of our panelists, you can put them in the chat and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. I want to bring you into this, Veronica, because you oversee so many different programs, but one of them, it's youth experiencing foster care. And I'd love for you to shed light on how critical is the role of education when it comes to youth experiencing foster care.
It's vital, and thank you for the opportunity to be here first and foremost. But education for all students, but particularly students who are historically underserved or often otherized, there's a real deep need for us to put systems in place so that our students can be successful and have options, right? The ultimate goal is to make sure that our students have choices and options for career, life, college. And the education system does that. But it only does that if we have legislation and supports and professional development. So that's the critical piece around education. We can't serve our students until we have systems in place to support them in being successful.
And Dr. Harris, did you want to weigh in on that as well? Just when you think about the role of education and how critical it is.
Well, I definitely agree. And I would like to say definitely thank you very much, Sam and Erica, for sharing your story with me, because I do find that is something that's very valuable, our stories. And to your point, and to your question, Angela, educational systems oftentimes have been called, some people call it the great equalizer. I think that the terminology is a little dated, but what individuals was talking about is that the education system was supposed to be able to support individuals regardless of their backgrounds or regardless what they came from, to be able to be in a position to where they can begin to start building that pathway that's going to lead to success as they define it. And so whenever there are barriers or whenever there is inadequate resources, individuals cannot realize that. And unfortunately, when we talk about students in care and we talk about our BIPOC communities and et cetera, oftentimes they are disenfranchised from being able to have total access to those type of resources and et cetera.
Gotcha. And Erika, I want to go to you for just a moment because I know that it's been a long journey and you are passionate about sharing your story. When you think back to your time since, you were 2 years old, as far back as you can remember, what role did education play in just turning things around for you mentally, emotionally? Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, so like mentioned previously, I've been in foster care since I was about 2 years old. I don't think I received proper education because there was no real guidance or any adult in my life who was making sure I was staying on top of being in class and attending. And so it wasn't until I found a stable placement when I was in, I want to say 8th or 9th grade, is when I actually started to really take a look at my education, because I noticed I was falling short in some areas, and I wanted to change that within myself because there were so many things in my life that had happened previous that I had no control over. And so I really just took control of my education, and I was able to, live in a stable home and start taking it serious. But I had to do a lot of work within myself because I was also facing generational trauma. And for me, the biggest struggle was always knowing I was in foster care, but not knowing the resources I had available to me. So
Mm.
education played the biggest role in my life because I realized that I had to become a person who wanted to become educated and learn all of the things that I could have available to me, but also learn the way and pave the way for my community and younger siblings.
Thank you for sharing that. And Sam, what about for you when you think about education? When did education, what role did that play in your trajectory?
Yeah, absolutely. Education was huge for me, and to the point that was just made earlier, right? Again, I think the term "the great equalizer" is a little dated, but I think that it really did provide me with an opportunity to be able to get out of the situation that I was in, right? The socioeconomic situation that I was in, and all those things, right? Getting out of systems, being not being stuck and heavily involved in systems and relying on systems, right? Um, and I think it's an important contrast too, right? Because growing up, I thought I was stupid, and going to college was never really an option for me. And again, going back to the supports and having positive supports, folks like my education specialists and tutors with Treehouse and various mentors and folks that I had that actually sat me down by the time I was think maybe a junior or going into my senior year, and was like, you can go to college, right? And I was like, what are you talking about? And for me, it was one of those things that didn't seem achievable or attainable. Um, but being able to pursue that really opened doors for me that truly would not have been open for me otherwise.
Hmm. I heard two things from you, like from you, Sam, and then from you, Erica. Erica, you were saying you didn't know the resources that were available to you, and then Sam, you talked about you didn't even know a certain thing was achievable. And so Veronica and Dr. Harris, you can weigh in on this too. You talk about putting systems in place. So we know, Senator Nobles mentioned, one change that's happening, having a touch point in the schools. When you think about the gaps that exist, where are the gaps? How do you see, and anyone actually can jump in on this one. Where are the gaps? What do we need to change to make sure that youth experiencing foster care know what's available to them and have access?
Well, at the state level, one of the biggest pieces that we've heard through surveys and everything is around professional development. There is a big gap with regards to professional development and training of staff, school leaders, district staff, in what are the supports and services needed. What is the federal law asking us to do, and what is the state law asking us to do? And then how do we do it and implement it meaningfully? Because it's not a one size fits all. So that is one of the biggest things we need more of is professional development for every person that works with students, right? The other piece is an asset-based shift, right? We need to shift the language from deficit to asset on what students bring to the table as foster care students, right? There is an opportunity to really develop a deep understanding through experiences, through students, panel discussions, to hear from the students themselves, to really talk about not only the barriers, but how is it that they continue to move forward? What is it that they need and what has been successful? I think those are really key pieces that we need. And then ultimately we need more staffing. And I don't mean tons of staffing, but now that we have one person in each school, thank you to Representative Nobles, we now need a regional representative because we have large districts and we have small rural districts. Those small rural districts often do not have the support that the larger ones do. If we can have an opportunity to do a networking within the regions, the 9 regions in Washington state, then we can benefit a lot more students in the services that are available.
Thank you for that thoughtful answer. Dr. Harris?
Yes, and also, Angela, I totally agree with Veronica. A point that I would add is something else that we also need to look at as it relates to research, not just research, but I'll say resources more in particular, is making sure that we make those viable community connections. Because something happens when you're able to link up with what I call cultural brokers. Erica and Sam would be cultural brokers. They're individuals with experiential knowledge who can come in and assist with professional development as well as help staff, administrators to be able to build the level of empathy that is necessary to support families, as well as to help them to be on the lookout. Because something that I noticed is that there's yet a stigma that's associated with the child being in care. I've seen caregivers of which did not want to share that with the school because they didn't want the student treated any differently. And so I think those are things that we will, definitely need to look at in addition to the resources, is make sure that we have a doorway that is open within our schools that's going to allow for individuals such as Erica and Sam to be able to walk in and say, hey, listen, I'm going to help you save a lot of time, energy, and effort as you're trying to accomplish this goal that I know that you want to accomplish. You want to help everyone who's present, but you may not have the knowledge that you need to understand the level of generational trauma. You may not be able to understand the ACEs, and oftentimes, if you would listen, and this is an area of research for me in particular, in terms around community engagement and working with social service delivery efforts. And what I've discovered is many times the experts are present, but since they don't carry a certain level of clout, a certain type of level of education attainment, they're often discounted. And so I would say, as we're looking to revamp the system, partly, yes, we got to bring in additional resources because mostly everyone is taxed and we know that resource is limited, but that's always been the norm, in my opinion. I think we do have to bring those resources in, but I think we also have to really leverage the community resources, the community leaders and individuals who have experience, being in care as well.
Thank you so much for that. And Sam and Erica, I can see you nodding your head. Sam, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I really do appreciate Dr. Harris's point, and I really do think that it's also really continuing to uplift the voices that are not traditionally in this space, right? I think I'm able to kind of articulate the things that I've experienced through my education, right? But if folks don't necessarily have that traditional or formal clinical language, that doesn't mean that their voice is any less valid, right? And I really do want to uplift that because there are folks who did go through similar situations like me and don't necessarily have this platform, but we should be hearing from them as well, too.
And that's, Sam, I know that's one of the things that drives you in doing your advocacy work. It is because of other people you knew experiencing foster care that didn't get to where you are.
Right. It really oftentimes makes me think about my one of my closest friends who passed away when I was 17 and had a very similar upbringing to me, very similar backgrounds, involvement in the foster care system as well. And that's a voice that we didn't get to hear. And that's that's someone that didn't get the support that they needed, but was on the exact same trajectory as me, right? And I think that provides the contrast of how different things can go for somebody. And to not be able to have that person here to share these moments or to be on this platform. And I think that's really the important piece because there are voices that aren't heard. And that's really why I continue to do this work. And I know that's why others do it as well. But we really have to be intentional about uplifting those voices.
Well said. Thank you for making that point. We've been getting a lot of questions, so I want to just bring in a few of those right now. And we were talking about the systems, and this is from Ashley saying, as a former foster youth and director serving in an organization dedicated to serving foster youth through education in California, what are systems doing to support foster youth, and are your systems connected or siloed?
I can start. Systems is, for me, it means networks, right? And what key partners and stakeholders do we have? COVID was a perfect example of a need to really maximize our partnerships Treehouse came in. They really helped us with food insecurities, with technology issues. They supported us with hubs. And it was through that networking of different stakeholders and different programs that we're able to really provide additional services. So it's maintaining and really bringing issues to the forefront so that we can continue to network. That has been really crucial for me. So our networks continue to be community partners, organizations such as Treehouse, DCYF, and we do talk to each other, but we can do it much, much better. And we can continue to grow and develop in how we do that. But it is vital.
And while you're up, I think it was you who said this. Someone commented, yes, asset-based language. And about gaps, this person said, I studied gifted education. Youth experiencing foster care are so left out of gifted education. How can we help children in care so their strengths are identified and encouraged? Does anyone have ideas for that or would like to take that question?
So as a former principal in Seattle Public Schools, I was able to, and I did have accelerated programs in our school. We had an informal process that would have teacher nominations and selections that would support a more diverse inclusion in our advanced programs. And so that was one of the ways of thinking outside of the box, getting permission from the district, of course, and doing that. But I think it's a historically problematic program that often does overlook students of color and students in high need areas. So continuing to think outside of the box is going to be necessary.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in? No pressure.
I was just gonna throw in that I really do like the point that was made earlier around being asset based. During my time working with Treehouse as an education specialist and thinking about the supports that we wanted to uplift for young people, I think part of it is recognizing that there are current systems in place that make gifted programs limited in accessibility, right? And so opening up that accessibility, opening up the opportunities for young people to get access to that testing, and also what testing are we doing, right? How are we testing young people, and what forms of knowledge are we valuing and uplifting, right? I think that we can do a better job of reevaluating that. And again, it's an accessibility piece too, right?
No, that's a great point. I think about the process, at least when I was privy to it several years ago. If you didn't have someone advocating for you to go get the test, sign you up for the test, you definitely weren't going to be considered for any of those advanced programs. And so those kind of changes, would that be a legislative change? Would that be at the school district level? Where would that happen as you see it, Dr. Harris or Veronica?
Well, I'll definitely say I want to say both. But I think something that I really would bring out, one thing that I have discovered is throughout my educational career, 14 years plus, and then doing community engagement work prior, is that everything yet happens through relationships. I think a hard thing is when we talk about systems in particular, systems are designed to do what systems do, be efficient, operate around limited resources and et cetera. And they're designed for a targeted population. And so when we begin to start talking about what do it means to be supporting individuals that's not typically supported, we have to be think so critically as well as be prepared to do things that are non-traditional. Like some things that we call policy and procedure are not policy and procedure. They're interpretations of policy and procedure. And sometimes some things we have and some things we do or don't do is all based upon whether or not it's going to drum up litigation. And I think when we begin to start talking about advocacy and supporting students, getting them access to the programming that they need and et cetera, we have to be inclusive of community members. We have to be inclusive of school staff, and we have to have conversations, sometimes informally, and really work within some of the systems that exist to kind of help individuals and educate the system so they can change and be actually altered to meet some of the needs. That being said, I will be the first to tell you, as everyone on the line knows, that can be quite frustrating. So I'll just say that.
Very well. Thank you so much, Dr. Harris, for that. And I would love to, I know we have a few more questions coming from the audience, and I'll get to those in just a moment. But Erica and Sam, I would love to hear about your advocacy work. We've talked a little bit about your journey and the role of education. So, what work do you do these days, and what does your advocacy look like?
I'll go ahead and go first. So for me, a lot of the advocacy work comes from just generally reaching out to people. I was introduced to Treehouse my senior year of high school, so I definitely received a lot of the support that I needed there. And then moving on to college, there are more resources that were available to me that I had no idea were even possible. And I kind of made it a point to, just really recognize how thankful I am for these resources. And it was kind of like one of those things where it's like, this is something as amazing as this shouldn't be just for me. So any friends on campus I would meet, or just, they don't even have to be friends. If I have a conversation with somebody and foster care gets brought up, I make it a point to recognize them for who they are and be like, just, want to put this out there. There are resources if you're struggling. And I do a lot of direct work with people, and kind of just opportunities like this of sharing my voice and doing whatever I can to get the word out about the need for change in foster care.
When you look back at those supports you received during that time, was there one that was just the game changer?
Um, it was probably for me personally, freshman year of college. I had, as a first generation college student, I had nobody in my life prior, any adults that had graduated college. I am the first person in my family that will graduate college. And so going into it, it was like super nerve wracking. And the biggest thing, it's small, but it was huge to me, was having somebody support me and help me register for classes, and understanding what FAFSA is and how important it is to apply every year. And just, I was able to create a grad plan my sophomore year. And now that I have and understand the ropes of registering for classes, because that's super important every quarter, I it was just, I was like so amazed. And even all my friends who aren't in foster care, I'm like, with this support, I was able to learn this, and I want to share this with you so you too have a better understanding.
Yeah. And Veronica, I just saw you just nodding when she mentioned, I mean, the idea that this was a simple thing that was so huge.
Yeah, I relate to it personally, right? First generation, having somebody there that can navigate and help you walk through the system and all the red tape and the paperwork that is so foreign, right? So I totally understand that. And why I clap and applaud is because of the extra step she takes, which is helping others, right? So that's huge.
Yeah. I have a question that just came in from Anna Marie, saying she works with new high school teachers in Seattle. What would you want teachers to know, ask, pay attention to in order to help students in foster care feel connected to the classroom, seen, and valued for their brilliance and potential? What would you want these new high school teachers to know, ask, look for? And anyone can jump in when you're ready.
So I can jump in. I think one, it's easy to want to overgive support, which can be overwhelming, right? And so I think that it's about acknowledging, recognizing that young people who are experiencing foster care right now do need that extra support, but they need grace as well too, right? They might not come to class every day. They might not turn in their homework assignment on time. Um, but it's about understanding that and providing that grace and being a stable support. one of my mentors used to use a phrase called relentless commitment, and that stuck out to me so much because we know how young people can be in adolescence, right? We know what that looks like. We know how that can show up in ways that don't, and like not trusting people, not trusting adults, and limit testing and all these other things, right? And for me, I did a lot of that stuff, right? I used to fire my tutors. I used to quit on my mentors. I used to do all that stuff, right? But the folks that stayed, the folks that never gave up, are the folks who are still in my life today, right? And I think that that's what you have to be in those spaces.
Mhm.
Did anyone else want to add anything in terms of what she might share with teachers
As an
regarding this?
educator, a former educator, I would want to make sure that I focused on the whole child, right? Not just the academic part, but really understanding the social, the emotional needs that a student would have. Because you can't move on and really excel in the academic until you have the basic needs met.
It's what Sam was telling us earlier about it's hard to thrive if you're just trying to survive. And that is just, when he said that, I just got it. I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And just for clarification, and maybe many of you already watching this know this. So right now, our teachers in Washington, because you mentioned professional development, I think Dr. Harris and Veronica, both of you talked about it, trauma-informed care. Are teachers in Washington getting any professional development and trauma-informed care?
Yes, and I would say that this started well before COVID in the state of Washington, with folks, staff, district staff, as well as teachers getting professional development around trauma-informed practices. Districts have what we call local control. So the amount of professional development really is up to them to determine. We guide at the state level. So it really is varied as to the frequency and the depth of the professional development with regards to social emotional care.
Should that change? Or I'm sure that would have to be something that would have to happen in Olympia, probably, in terms of the rules. And maybe I'm stepping on toes here by asking that question.
So it's definitely changing now, and the assistant superintendent Martin Mueller is the one who has quite a few initiatives right now with legislative folks really building on this and expanding it and providing opportunities for growth and development around that. But it takes time, especially with teachers, with turnover and all of that. It isn't something that can just happen in 1 year.
Okay.
And I would also say, Angela, we are at a, oh, I'm sorry. I would also
you're
say
great.
that
You
we
have
are
the
also
floor.
at a, okay, I would also say we're at a pivotal time in terms of what can happen in education around social emotional learning, restorative practices, as well as trauma informed practices being taught. It is, I don't want to say in right now, but it is one of the things, or a few of the different types of things that are really being taught and really being elevated within school districts right now. So I would encourage all stakeholders to keep pushing in and saying that we need social emotional learning. We need trauma informed practices. We need to make sure we're learning about generational trauma, all the ACEs and et cetera. That would be my recommendation. Just keep it going.
I'm
Mhm.
glad you brought up ACEs and adverse childhood experiences, and this, because this question has come up several times, that youth in care typically do have a high ACE score. I think that's how you call it. Would increasing mental health support at the school level increase youth involvement with their education? And if so, what would that look like? What could that look like?
I don't have an answer to that, but that is precisely why we need to have opportunities for research to directly do something like that, to interview students who are in foster care and really develop a plan to measure if it is successful or not. And ACEs is definitely used around the state. It's something that is a common practice, but it is one tool, right? So we would really need to have the opportunity to go deeper into a variety of tools to see which one is the most effective and supportive for students.
Awesome. Thank you, Veronica.
I
Sam?
think that Yeah, I think that oftentimes one of the things to be considerate about with young people in foster care is that sometimes mental health can be prescriptive. And I think that the way that we can really change that is providing different opportunities for mental health spaces, right? So there's music therapy, and there's art therapy, and there's a lot of other ways to be able to actively promote mental health. And of course, there's, traditional therapy as well too, right? But um, I think really being able to create spaces, support groups, right? Being able to have support groups for young people, um, and peer-to-peer learning opportunities and other spaces, even just meditation, meditation opportunities and things like that, to be able to, how can we really change this space to be more conducive to overall mental well-being? And I think that again, those are just some ideas, right? But I think that we can continue to be innovative about the way that we think about that, and push the envelope.
Appreciate your honesty on that, Sam. A couple of questions for you, actually, for you and Erica. And this came from Michelle. It says, apart from education, because it is a broad concept, right? What would you say was the one most impactful thing that helped you to successfully break through the difficulties of experiencing foster care personally? The one most impactful thing that helped you break through. And thank you, Michelle, for that question. I know this is a big one because you're having to like think back over time.
I could take a stab at it. It really is hard to decide or say one thing in particular, but I think something that was really big for me is that I'm bigger than foster care, right? Like my life and my identity, my purpose, um, why I'm here is bigger than foster care. And for so long, it felt like the only identity to me. And because it consumed my life, right? It was something that was so at the forefront. When you're in that space of survival and instability, it's hard to not see past that, right? But then when you are in that space to be able to thrive, it's like, I mean, I love anime and video games and all these other, and sports and all these other things, right? My identity and who I am as a person is not directly tied to my experience in foster
Mhm.
care, and being able to see beyond that and see um, greater horizons did make a difference.
Yeah.
And was there someone, obviously, that came from within? Was there is someone who stirred that in you? I think the energy of the question. I think Michelle may be trying to think. Okay, when I look at all of the different supports or systems that could be out there, where should I put my energy? Was there a mentor who help stir that in you, or was it completely within? What would you share? And
Yeah,
then I'll get to you, Erica.
yeah, I definitely had um, a few really strong mentors who did continue to kind of push me to um, find my true passion. And again, right, like even back to the advocacy question, I am in the advocacy space, right? But that's because I love policy and politics, right? I love the idea of politics, and that being able to be pushed beyond that, or being able to be pushed into the space that I wanted to be in from my mentors, was really helpful. And to say that, um, and to constantly affirm me. I think that that was really big, is that affirmation, and that um, and I think for so long I was kind of had my confidence derailed and didn't really believe in myself. And so having the people who constantly uplifted me and told me that, essentially what you should tell young people, you can be what you want to be. And also I think there's some concrete support in being able to help explore those opportunities, and providing opportunities to be able to explore my passions really did help a lot as well. And my mentors really did connect me to those opportunities.
So the mentorship made a huge difference of someone affirming your identity beyond the one you had been labeled with, which is, foster care kid, and they were able to see you and celebrate you, which is a beautiful thing. Erica, what about you? I know you had maybe a moment to just think about what may have been the most impactful thing that helped you kind
Yeah.
of navigate through the barriers.
I would definitely say, and this is probably unexpected, but it was the moment that I truly understood what it meant to be in foster care. And then soon after that, learning the effects of what other children's face, I kind of looked at myself, evaluated my situation, where I come from, who I am and my identity, and struggling with my identity is what I had the hardest time with, because I'm like, okay, well, I don't have my biological parents in my life, and I've had multiple different people come into my life that were taking care of me for a short period of time. And then that struggle came with, okay, you have the resources available to you. And then I looked at my younger siblings, because I am an older sister and I have 7 siblings in total. And so I kind of was looking at the situation, and I'm like, okay, well, how can I make this situation better for myself and for my siblings, so they don't have to endure what me and my older siblings had to go through. And with that, changed the trajectory of what my life statistically was supposed to go. And by the time of me figuring that all out, I don't know if there was one particular person that motivated me. I think it was like a cumulative of all the support that I received from family members, educators, and then even my education specialist from Treehouse that I received, really helped me pave the way of like what I can do.
It was all of those things. It was, your own realization, and then having all of it. It sounds like, when you look at, once you had that realization, what resources were around you that helped you get to where you wanted to be?
I would probably say really just talking to my foster parents and trying to get a better understanding of everything. Yeah, it's like hard to say, because everything is like, for me, it's all of the little things adding up.
That's so true. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And I know, Sam, we didn't get to go to the details of your advocacy work and what you're up to. So would you mind sharing just a bit of that?
Yeah, and even just to circle back on Erica's point too, I think that that's a really big piece, is that when we think about the trajectory of young people in traditional families, it's not really one thing that leads to their success, right? It's parents, it's aunties, it's uncles, it's friend down the street, it's neighbor that supports the young person. It's the dad's friend that gave them that first job, right? All these pieces of social capital that are not often awarded to us, and so I think that that's a big piece of it too. But to the question,
Well said. I'm
you
glad
know,
you shared that. Thank you.
absolutely. And for me, I was able to kind of start my own consulting firm to be able to really jump into the advocacy and policy space, to be able to work on not just child welfare, but a lot of intersecting systems, because as we talked about earlier, right, these things are connected to each other. Mental health is connected to child welfare, which is connected to education, which is connected to criminal justice, which is, connected to healthcare, right? And so we have to be working actively in all these spaces to be able to really continue to move the needle. And so for me, as I said before, I really like policy. And so being able to be in that space full time to, again, help to find ways to be able to move the needle as much as I can is what I'm up to nowadays. And it's pretty fulfilling.
Thank you. So I had one other question. This is kind of because I think a lot of people are here watching, they care, they want to learn. And I think it was someone else, maybe it was Senator Nobles, that said unlearn, right? Which is important. And I know we've talked about some gaps. We know there are some that exist right now. And I would love to hear from anyone who would like to weigh in on this one. Because so much happens on the legislative end that impacts your work. What can we do as advocates to help bridge some of these gaps? Is there anything going on right now that we should be advocating for or contacting our lawmakers about?
Well, right now, they're gearing up to have their proposals submitted for January, right? So the timing is perfect. What I would recommend is that all of our legislators have opportunities for engagement from community. So that would be a really vital time to get on their websites, find out when they are, and advocate on behalf of foster care. And then obviously to focus on the gaps that we just shared earlier. So that's one way. But it's also working with your school districts too to advocate and really have the superintendent or your school board even more effectively understand the needs and then advocate up to OSPI.
Yeah, that's great. And you know what, as Sam and Erika beautifully articulated, that these little things add up. And I love, Sam, what you shared about when you look at someone who maybe hasn't experienced foster care. It's often not one single thing. It's the cumulative nature of just all of these other supports, people, programs in their lives. It can that makes a huge difference. Did anyone else want to share what we can be doing right now to advocate on at the state level on this issue? I know you love policy and politics, Sam, so I know your hand's going to go up.
I got a list, but I'm going to just highlight one thing.
I'm ready.
And this is really pertinent on the state level right now too, and it's a big conversation, but I think it's actually really apropos to our conversation now. Supports for young people in extended foster care, and with the pandemic going on, there was some additional supports that were provided to young people, but those young people are now aging out of the system. We had a moratorium that prevented young people from aging out, and this is that 18 to 21/23 range, which is oftentimes when young people are in college or trying to really find their footing in their adulthood, right? And those supports just ran out, and so we love to push folks a little bit to be able to increase those supports. But I think it was just like Veronica said, right? Civic engagement is so key and so critical. So being able to just stay informed and continue to find areas and places to get involved. There's lots to be done. And we really want to make sure that we're uplifting and supporting what Erika said earlier, which is the prevention of young people even going into the system in the first place. And so however we can help uplift and support communities to do that, I really think that is crucial.
And speaking of that question, someone did weigh in with that. They said, thank you for your voice and strength to both of you, Sam and Erika. What do you think families need to stay together? How do we keep families intact and support them to thrive?
I think this, it's a little bit difficult to answer this question because it's not just one solution that can solve something as big as this. From my understanding, I know that it's probably a lack of homes that can take in X amount of children. So if they have siblings and they can't take all of them in, it's more so you have to pick and choose who goes to what home. And so I'm not really entirely sure what needs to happen, but I do strongly believe that if it's possible, we should be doing more work to keep families and children together.
Yeah, I know a lot of people would agree with you on that, Erika. And this probably is a great segue to something else you're passionate about, Sam, which is kinship care.
And I would say, first and foremost, is ask the family. To the point that I made earlier, is that oftentimes it's easy for us in the proverbial ivory tower to come up with really good solutions that we find out are not useful to the community members at all. And so it's about going down into the communities and asking them what they need and prioritizing and doing some of that power sharing and uplifting those voices to see what will be useful to be able to help them keep their families together.
Mm-hmm.
Well said. Okay, so this question came in from Desiree. What role can extracurricular activities and educational settings play in developing hobbies and healthy outlets? Would this help youth in care stay engaged in school? Anyone have thoughts on that? Dr. Harris, you were nodding your head. Go ahead.
I think I'm reminiscing a little bit, to be honest. And what role can extracurricular activities play? I think they can play a huge, I think they're actually huge when you begin to start looking at possible supports and support networks and systems. And I was reminiscing about when I was an interventionist in a high school and I had a student in care, another couple of other students come to me and ask me about starting a dance club or something. I'm rhythmically challenged, but I agreed to do it. And I would, after school, just watch them and, kind of fake a little bit like I knew what I was talking about, with the choreography. And they humored me, but it was more about being able to spend time with an individual of which they probably looked up to. I didn't think about it at the time, but now that I'm looking in hindsight, it's probably because since they saw me as a consistent presence in the building, that I would constantly check on them at some of the key moments, right before they get into a fight. I would be right there, and I would help walk them down from in terms of when it was escalated. I think that those types of things can be critical. I think something we have to look at is making sure that we know that it doesn't have to be a big, huge budget. To Sam's point, we have the opportunity to ask them what they want. If they say they want to, if individual children or children in care say that we would really like to have, a club that really looked at 90s music, I'll probably be happy to be a part of that, but that's a side note. But if they say they want to look at 90s music, being present, doing research on 90s music, bringing some of the material in, and being engaged in the conversation and learning, because it's nothing, in my opinion, more powerful than you as an adult, you as a leader, you as a teacher, to submit yourself to the learning process to teach others the value and getting support from others.
Love it. Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead, Erika.
I just wanted to add, from personal experience, I know the extracurricular stuff at school definitely helped me. I was able to be involved in a lot of sports, and that was super helpful to me. And I know that it can be helpful to other students, because if they are living in a home and it's not like the best situation for them, and one of the things they struggle with is not wanting to go home, it kind of gives them an opportunity to stay involved in the extracurricular activities and not have to worry about being at home in that moment. And for me, I know there was a point in time where I struggled with my identity as a foster care child, and really my living situation. There were some things that were going on that I had no control over and were extremely difficult for me to navigate. I was able to become connected and create a bond with my cheer coach. And so with that, she kind of motivated me and helped me a lot. And one thing that I still hold on to this day is we called it a golden nugget. So the golden nugget resembles essentially getting to the end of my high school career. So instead of wanting to blow up and quit everything that I had built, it was like, hold on to your golden nugget. You're almost there. You're almost to graduation. And then you can further indulge yourself into something that you want to do, because you have control of your education outside of once you graduate high school. So it was one thing that definitely helped me and kept me motivated, was that one person, and she's super special in my life to this day. And I appreciate all the help and support that I've received from her. And
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And something hit me, because Sam, you were saying earlier that when an idea, I think it might have been college or something, was presented, you were like, you didn't even see yourself as that. And when I think about the question someone presented earlier about what can teachers do, I think it can be interesting when a teacher does notice something about a student beyond the identity that they've been labeled. Hey, I notice you're really good at this. How about, you come join this, or you go, I think you'd be good at this. How about you try this? Because they may not even think of it because of, like you said, that survival mode. And they may not see themselves in these other areas. So just someone else outside of their whatever situation they may be in notices them and says, I see this in you, can just be huge, huge. And Sam, someone weighed in when you were talking about the legislation, or I guess legislation you would like to see to help people 18 and older, I think between the 18 and 23 range. They said, per your call, how do we get involved? So 18 and over, going out of foster care, how can we get involved and help? I know that's a magical question, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's lots of ways to get involved. I think it's being able to call your local legislator, calling the governor's office, and there's even some movement, on the congressional level, so calling our senators and things like that to be able to actively ask for that push. There's a push right now to be able to provide the flexibility for that funding. So call your legislators, call your lawmakers, and ask them to push this forward. And as Veronica said earlier, they're gearing up for January, right? And so even continuing to ask for more supports and more resources for young people in these systems.
Okay. Thank you for that. Before we close out, I'd love to hear from each of you. Just, is there anything else you want people to know today? I know we've covered a lot of ground. And let's see, I'll just start with this on the left side of my screen. So, Veronica, is there anything else you would like people to know or something else you'd like to share with our audience today?
So I'm new in this role for foster care, and I just want to thank the opportunity to hear from folks who have been in the foster care system. I think that is one of the biggest things that we can learn from. And so in my role, I will make sure that we maximize opportunities like that for our educators, for folks who are making funding decisions at state level. That is definitely one of the key takeaways I have here, because I've learned today and as well as participated in this learning, and I'm grateful.
Yay, I love that. Thank you, Veronica. So, Sam, what about you? Anything else you want people to know today?
I feel like I've talked a lot, but I think my last piece would just, at the end of everything, continue to do healing work and trust building work. I think that there's a lot of healing that needs to be done, and building trust in our communities, with our young people, with our families. We need to do that. We need to make sure that they feel good about the supports and services that we want to provide. And so continue to do that healing work and continue to do that trust building work in our communities is critical.
Thank you. What about you, Erika?
I agree with Sam's point on a lot of the healing work that can be done and supporting people through that. And with that, I kind of want to touch base on if you're looking to help foster youth, it's easy to want to generalize, okay, well, what do we need to help foster youth? And it's hard to do that without specifying on one specific area of scenarios that foster youth go through. So I pretty much just want to point out that look at them as a person, not just for what they're going through and just, their identity as a foster youth, but evaluate them as a person, set healthy boundaries with them, and really listen to them and what they need, because not every foster youth goes through, has the same situation and so forth. Just pay attention to their particular needs and not generalize them of like, oh, all foster youth need this, when every child is different.
Yeah, good insight. Thank you, Erika. Dr. Harris, anything else you want people to know, you want to leave people with?
I would just like to say thank you. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you for definitely the rich conversation. I would like to say, thank you to all the educators. Thank you for all the individuals who are working in social service agencies, trying to make a difference. And to everyone, I would say, please take some time for yourself. Celebrate what you may call a small win, and know that your best is good enough, even though it may not appear it is at the time.
Amen.
Nice little drop the mic moment. Thank you. Yeah, Erika, Sam, Veronica, Dr. Harris, we value you so much. We appreciate your insights and you telling your stories and all about your advocacy work as well. So until next time. Right now, I would like to turn things over to the CEO of Treehouse, Dr. Lisa Chen.
Thanks, Angela. I'm Lisa Chen, and I'm the CEO of Treehouse. We are so thankful to have been able to convene and sponsor our equity series, and I'd love to thank the panelists and our viewers for taking time out of your busy schedules to support such a worthy cause and such a needed conversation. And thank you especially to Senator Nobles for your stirring remarks. Our community is so blessed to have someone with your background and talents working to make a difference for youth experiencing foster care. Your tireless service continues to inspire us at Treehouse and across Washington state. And thanks also so much to King 5's Angela Poe Russell. You have been gracious enough to moderate 2 equity events for Treehouse this year, bringing your commitment to social justice along with your incisive journalistic sensibilities. Thank you so much, Angela. And finally, I feel so privileged to have listened to such a moving and insightful discussion from our panelists. And thank you all for your willingness to share your difficult stories from your personal lives. You've come a long way, and we admire your commitment to uplift others with your experiences. I've devoted my career to equity and education, and I've been so blessed to reap the benefits and the opportunities of a first-class education. And as a Chinese American woman, I've also experienced firsthand the unequal playing field in the U.S. for minority groups. And a community is only as strong as its weakest link. So it's up to all of us to strengthen the bonds that bind us and to never hold each other down and never leave someone else behind. And that's why I am so proud and so humbled to work alongside the devoted team at Treehouse, because in 2017, Treehouse achieved a major goal when our youth nearly doubled their high school graduation rates in just 5 years. And our current goal is that by 2027, 90% of youth who have experienced foster care across the entire state of Washington will complete high school with support and a plan to transition into independence. Our youth-centered academic program, Graduation Success, plays a huge role in achieving this goal, partnering with youth in foster care to engage and invest in their education and their future. And we work every day to do all that we can, but of course, we need your continued help. And so to that end, I am really excited to announce that in November, we are going to release a documentary in which we take a deep dive into the inequities of the Washington state foster care system with the purpose of building a stronger future for all of us. And this film is going to look at the history of foster care in Washington state and will also examine urgently needed systemic changes that are at the intersection of foster care, education, and equity, and it will also offer essential testimony from many of our equity campaign participants. Please stay tuned for more information on this upcoming film, and thank you again for your support. And finally, I would like to thank our friends at KD Hall Communications for partnering and producing this equity series alongside our beautifully committed and passionate Treehouse team. Again, I'm Lisa Chin, and I look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Shin. There's so much exciting stuff going on between the documentary and the news on the graduation rates. It's a hopeful time, and I am honored to be able to partner with Treehouse and our ability to make a difference. And I'm going to give you a couple of ways that you can be part of this too. So the year-end giving is getting started October 20th, followed by Giving Tuesday. That's November 30th, just so you can plan around that. And again, the documentary that Lisa introduced will be released later this fall, and we'll be having more information on that to share in the coming weeks. And again, I'm saying again and again, so much to acknowledge, but the equity series, we did 2 this year. We're going to keep going next year and the year after that. Again, this is a journey, not a destination. We are so grateful that you spent the last, time flies. I don't know, it's been an hour and a half. We're just so grateful that you stopped by to listen and learn. We can't wait to see you again next time. To stay in touch with all that Treehouse is up to, you can head to treehouseforkids.org. That is treehouseforkids.org. On behalf of Treehouse, I'm Angela Poe Russell from King 5 Evening. Have a wonderful day, and thank you again.